Hi everyone, this is George Theodorides from SPD 500. I hope you're all doing well. As for the first question, how Richard D. Lavoie tries to explain fairness, he says that it's everyone getting what they need, not what they think they deserve. So an example would be the parent thinking that the child is not getting enough attention. Meanwhile, there are 20 to 30 other students in the classroom. So only so much can be done. When a child does undergo testing for learning disabilities, they do a battery of tests by the school psychologist, and the teacher also does the reading tests to see if anything is wrong. And after interviewing them, I've learned that the whole process is a big collaboration, and they have to take very careful notes on what is being done. So the teacher has to go to the ancillary team with, facts, with recordings. She can't just say, I think something's wrong because just this and this happened. I could compare this to social work a little bit because people do get what they need. I mean, it's meager living on benefits, but they think they deserve more. But there's only just so many people, that the government can take care of, especially when they're receiving, like, let's say SSI, as opposed to SSDI when they had worked and they can, have access to more money. So I think sort of the same goes for teaching. There are just so many resources that can go around. I mean, a teacher is trying. I've met teachers who are so dedicated, and they're very meticulous. They'll write down everything that they've seen from the child, you know, um, broken down activities into very simple steps. Uh, they call them manipulatives, where, like in math, if they need to learn how to add and subtract, they'll use cubes. Also, in reading, they'll see if a child can remember a word from the previous page to start the next page. And at the end, of course, they'll see what they understood. In terms of writing, they will even start the child off with a sentence and see how they complete it, or if they can do the whole paragraph or essay on their own. So basically, it's all about need. There's a lot of need with special education. I think I read a statistic, it's somewhere between 5 and 10% of children being diagnosed with learning disabilities. And after watching the video, I know that it's a little older, and that's actually one thing I noticed. They actually used the word retarded because this was back in the 70s when that was probably appropriate, and it no longer is. I actually had an experience where I interviewed for a job once, and they were trying to be professional about it, and they were saying, we have cases with cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, autism, um, and retards, etc. So they shouldn't have been using the word retards, but I was interviewing for a position. I wasn't about to correct them on that. So after all the people I've spoken to, from special education teachers, general education teachers, and staff such as social workers and school psychologists, I think that it is fair, what is going on, because everyone is pretty much getting what they need. And unfortunately, at certain times, there's only so much that can be done. I mean, the child can go through all of this battery of testing. The parents can be very involved and use certain techniques that the teachers will tell them how to use. But a lot of times, or not a lot of the times, sometimes a child won't respond. So If they don't, then it's on to the next method and the next method and the next method. The good thing about the public school system is that they won't give up on a child. They won't just keep him behind, him or her behind. With the No Child Left Behind Act, I think that's a little controversial because if a student can't really move on to the next grade, then and they would really benefit from staying in the grade and repeating it so that they really learn everything, I think that's a little more appropriate. From tutoring, I met students at a nonprofit organization called Women for Afghan Women. They came from war-torn areas like Afghanistan, Iraq, and they were like, let's say 9 years old, but they were in second grade. But when I worked with them, they were very intelligent. You know, they could read, write, do math very well. I think it was just a matter of, you know, that they got here and they tested at a certain level and they kind of like went along those grades. And yes, maybe they'll graduate past 18, towards 19. But I do see kids like that progressing very well. Maybe even skipping a grade. I myself was one of those children. I came from Greece after being born here. My family went to go live in Greece for a while. They built a home there and wanted to start a life there. But my mother wanted to come back here, so we did. And they had put me in the remedial classes with some students that I noticed were like native speakers, but just had actual learning disabilities. And when I was in intermediate school, um, I actually saw some behavior which I was told about by some of these teachers. Like one teacher said that I had a student actually throw a chair, which can get dangerous. So if you start throwing books and desks and whatever material they can get their hands on, I mean, somebody can get seriously hurt. So I've actually seen that. To me, it seemed like complete chaos when I saw it in intermediate school. But now I'm understanding it from a different perspective. So now that we've covered the topic of fairness, I would like to go over the topic of assumptions that Lavoine brings up. What stood out to me the most was the speed of the classroom, which also the participants noticed as well. It was done on purpose to make them see just how a class seems to a student with learning disabilities. Everything seems so high paced, they can't keep up. He gave specific examples, like if a student can't answer a question, the teacher will try to give them incentive to answer the question because they assume that they know it, but they just don't want to do it. And they'll tell them, for example, you'll go to recess early, or you'll be the first in line in gym, or something like this. Another example that I remember was of a student approaching a teacher and saying that they can't understand the instructions, and they'll just be sent away because they can only say it so many times. I mean, you know, I've read the instructions, but I just don't understand them. And finally, the teacher will get fed up and just say, just circle, you know, what you think is right and wrong, and they'll just say, okay, I'll go do it. Something else that I remember from the video is assuming that a child can differentiate between certain letters, or sometimes they can't even notice certain letters at all, like an N or an M or something. And the best thing to do in a situation like that, they said, would be to give the child some time, you know, maybe half an hour or so instead of the 5 minutes they're given with the rest of the class, and allow them to write in a, you know, in a quiet, peaceful environment where they're really able to do their work. So in addition to that, there was also the issue of letters, which I spoke about, which is like the letter P when turned certain ways. It can be a B, it can be a D, it can be a Q. So a child with disabilities will get all mixed up. Um, Towards the end of the video, they had commentary from the participants, and there was actually a young girl there. Seemed fairly normal, but she had a learning disability and talked about the difficulties that she went through. A learning disability isn't necessarily like written on your forehead. um, it's something that's tested for and worked on. So as far as three concepts that were meaningful to me were definitely the main part, which was pretty much throughout the video, was the speed of the class, and just how fast it seems um, to the learning disabled student. Another was how obviously teachers are human beings and they will get stressed too, and they'll yell at the child, and that provokes anxiety and at times depression because they start to feel as though they aren't as good as the other students, are not as smart, they feel stupid or dumb. So I think maybe this was a bigger problem back in the 70s, like teachers yelling at students and probably keeping students in general education classrooms, even though they should have been in special education classrooms, because a lot has changed over the past 40, 50 years. So I think things are a little different. What I was told by one teacher was that she'll work with a general education teacher, and for instance, she'll have like students who have autism and they're in her special ed class, but she'll actually put them in the general education class because they're doing so well in math, for instance. And other times, students from the general education classroom will go to the special ed classroom because they might be struggling with writing or reading, for instance. The last concept that I'll take away is knowing just how hard it is. There was a room full of professionals there, teachers, social workers, psychologists, even engineers. I remember they did an assignment where they read something. It was I forgot the name of the concept, but basically the concept was about vocabulary and how you can notice a certain listing of words, but when they're read in a paragraph, nothing can be understood. But if you use like fake words that kind of string along and make sense, then you'll understand it. And it was funny how the engineer reacted to it. He said he finally got it with like the jumbled words, and there was like a math problem which he was able to get. It was a very vague math question problem that was a little easier than it seemed, but he actually got it because of his experience and training. So all of these experiences, the video and what we've learned through different assignments, and especially getting to talk to teachers and staff members, will really leave a lasting impression on me. I actually saw in their faces just how fulfilling it was to be a teacher. They didn't seem very stressed or anything like that. I mean, they took time out of their day to interview me, and it was a joy. It seemed like it was a joy for them to work with children. Um, Basically, my teaching perspective is going to be filled with care and kindness. I would never yell at a child. I actually remember my parents telling me that when they were younger in Greece, they would be disciplined by getting hit really hard with the ruler, which would never happen nowadays. It would actually be assault. So, in the end, I know that I'm not perfect. Try to do my best each day as I do in social work, and now transitioning into teaching, going towards being a teaching assistant, which I will start soon. And I really want to see where this goes. As I've written in my previous posts, I developed a love of education through tutoring, and it felt as if though it wasn't work. I mean, I've brought this up to teachers I've spoken to that in social work, you have to write so much. It seems like a job where you do your job, then you have to write about it. So they have to do a lot of note taking to the teachers. So it's not just a 9 to 3 job. It might be for a teaching assistant, but for a teacher, they have to go home, they have to do notes, they have to prepare lessons, they have to do all that. So, I mean, I commend them for doing the job that they're doing. So, thank you very much for listening to me. I know I gave way too many examples. I'm usually long-winded, but thank you very much for a great class, and I wish you all the best in the future. Bye.